8 missed calls from my family glowed on my phone screen this Tuesday morning, all within the last hour. I sat in my new apartment 3 states away from Indiana, knowing exactly why they were calling now. 6 months ago, my parents screamed at me for refusing to empty my $20,000 savings account to fund my younger sister Melody's boutique startup. I had walked away without explaining why I needed that money, letting them call me selfish and heartless. This morning, they finally discovered the truth, and now they're desperate to reach me. 18 months earlier, my life looked completely different. I was 26 years old, working 2 jobs while living with my parents in suburban Indianapolis to save every penny possible. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. What my family didn't know was that I had been secretly saving for graduate school applications to get my master's degree in educational psychology. I had already been accepted to Northwestern University's program but deferred my enrollment to save enough money for tuition and living expenses. My dream was to open learning centers for children with learning disabilities, specifically focusing on innovative teaching methods that could help kids who struggled in traditional classroom settings. Every dollar I earned went directly into my savings account, except for what I contributed to household expenses. I had calculated exactly how much I needed for the first year of graduate school: $15,000 for tuition, $3,000 for an apartment deposit and first month's rent near campus, and $2,000 for books, supplies, and initial living costs until I could secure a graduate assistant position. The evening that changed everything started innocently enough. We were having dinner at our small kitchen table when Melody announced she wanted to start an online business selling handmade jewelry. Her eyes lit up as she described her vision of creating unique pieces that combine traditional techniques with modern designs. I've been researching the market, and there's definitely space for artisan jewelry that tells a story, she explained, pulling out her phone to show us photos she'd taken of her recent creations. Look at these earrings I made last weekend. I posted them on my personal Instagram, and 12 people asked where they could buy them. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. Dad suggested she start small to test the market before making major investments, and Mom volunteered to help with packaging and shipping logistics. For the next 2 weeks, our family dinners became brainstorming sessions about Melody's business potential. I spent my lunch breaks researching pricing strategies for handmade jewelry and helped her analyze competitor websites to identify gaps in the market. The excitement in the house was infectious, and I genuinely enjoyed supporting my sister's entrepreneurial ambitions. However, I began noticing concerning signs about our family's financial situation that I hadn't fully recognized before. Dad's prescription costs for his type 2 diabetes had increased significantly when his employer changed health insurance plans. Mom's hours at the department store had been cut from 35 per week to 28, reducing her income right when household expenses were climbing. Without telling anyone, I quietly started picking up additional tutoring sessions and increased my contribution to groceries and utilities. I wanted to help ease the financial pressure on my parents while still maintaining my savings goals for graduate school. The comfortable family dynamic we'd established around supporting Melody's creative dreams shifted dramatically during a seemingly ordinary Tuesday evening in late October. Melody had been researching the technical requirements for scaling her jewelry business and discovered something that would change our entire family dynamic forever. I found out why some handmade jewelry businesses succeed while others struggle, she announced during dinner, her voice carrying an edge of excitement mixed with concern. The successful ones either have perfect credit to qualify for business loans, or they have substantial investors who believe in their vision. She looked directly at me across the table, and I felt my stomach tighten with sudden apprehension. You've been saving money for years, right, Casandra? She asked, her tone shifting from informational to hopeful. Maybe we could be business partners. I provide the creative vision and production skills, you provide the initial investment capital, and we split the profits as the business grows. The request seemed innocent enough, but something about the way she phrased it made me realize that Melody had no idea about my graduate school plans. In that moment, I understood that my family assumed my savings account was just money sitting idle, waiting for the right opportunity to be spent. They had no clue that every dollar represented a carefully planned step toward my educational and career goals. I managed a non-committal response about needing to think about business partnerships, but the seed of a much larger conflict had just been planted at our kitchen table. The 2 weeks following Melody's business partnership suggestion revealed a side of my sister I had never seen before. Instead of starting small with the jewelry she could already make, she became obsessed with researching the most expensive equipment and professional setups she could find online. She spent entire afternoons at craft fairs and jewelry shows, not to sell her existing pieces, but to study successful vendors and photograph their booth displays. Each trip cost money for admission, gas, and what she called market research purchases of other artists' work. Her credit card balance grew from $0 to $1,500 within 10 days. I need to understand the professional standards, she explained when Mom questioned the expense of a $300 photography ring light shed ordered online. Hello. I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. Hello. I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. Northwestern University had sent me detailed information about the program's start date in 6 months, including specific deadlines for housing applications and course registration. I needed my savings intact to cover the first-year expenses, but my family's pressure was intensifying daily. Melody began showing me expensive equipment catalogs during our conversations, pointing out professional photography setups that cost thousands of dollars and specialized metalworking tools that seemed far beyond what her current skill level required. She talked about her business as if it were already established and successful, rather than an idea that existed mostly on paper and in her imagination. Look at this casting equipment, she said one afternoon, pointing to a catalog page featuring tools that cost more than my car. With setup like this, I could create custom pieces and take on larger orders. The profit margins would be amazing. Her excitement was genuine, but her financial planning was non-existent. She had no budget, no realistic timeline for reaching profitability, and no backup plan if the business failed to generate immediate income. The breaking point came during a family dinner in early November. Melody had spent the afternoon touring potential studio spaces and returned home with news that would fracture our family relationships permanently. I found the perfect location, she announced, spreading rental brochures across the dinner table. It's a studio space in the Arts District downtown, with amazing natural light and enough room for all the equipment you'll need. The rent is $3,000 per month, but the exposure to foot traffic and other artists will be invaluable for building my customer base. My parents stared at the glossy brochures, showing spacious, professionally designed artist studios with polished concrete floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. $3,000 per month, Mom repeated, her voice strained with concern. Honey, that's more than our mortgage payment. I know it seems expensive, Melody replied quickly. But you have to invest money to make money. Plus, I already put down the security deposit using my emergency credit card, so the space is basically reserved for me. The room fell silent. Dad's face showed a mixture of shock and disappointment, while Mom's expression shifted to panic. You put down a deposit without discussing it with anyone, I asked, feeling my own anxiety spike at the implications. I had to act fast. Melody, defensive, responded. The space was going to be rented by tomorrow if I didn't move quickly. Besides, I thought my successful sister would obviously want to help me achieve my dreams. She looked directly at me while saying this, and I realized that Melody had made this major financial commitment assuming I would fund her venture. In her mind, my refusal to immediately support her business would make me responsible for her failure. How much was the security deposit? Dad asked quietly. $2,000, Melody admitted. But it's refundable if the business doesn't work out. Mom put her head in her hands, and I could see Dad calculating in his head how much money Melody had now committed without having any income stream to support these expenses. Melody, I said carefully, what's your plan for covering the monthly rent while you build up your customer base? That's why I need an investor, she replied, as if the answer should be obvious. The first 6 months will be about establishing the business and building inventory. Once word gets out about my jewelry, the orders will cover all expenses and start generating profit. The naive optimism in her voice broke my heart, but I also felt anger rising at how she had made these decisions, assuming she could pressure me into funding her mistakes. When I asked how she had made such a major commitment without consulting our family first, Melody's composure cracked completely. She started crying and said she thought her successful sister would obviously want to help her achieve her dreams instead of questioning every decision. Mom immediately wrapped Melody in a protective hug, while Dad fixed me with a stern look that suggested I was being unnecessarily harsh by asking practical questions about Melody's business planning. In that moment, I realized our family dynamic had shifted permanently. I was no longer Melody's supportive older sister helping her explore business possibilities. I had become the villain standing between her and her dreams, simply because I wasn't immediately willing to fund her impulsive financial decisions. The month following Melody's studio commitment transformed our house into an emotional battlefield where every conversation somehow circled back to my reluctance to fund her business venture. The $3,000 monthly rent deadline approached like a storm cloud hanging over every family interaction. Melody's credit card debt had climbed to over $4,000 as she continued purchasing equipment and supplies for a business that existed only in her imagination. She bought a professional camera setup for product photography, premium packaging materials that cost more per unit than many of her finished pieces, and specialized jewelry tools she didn't yet know how to use properly. My parents' approach to convincing me became more sophisticated and emotionally manipulative with each passing day. Mom started sharing stories during dinner about other families where siblings had pooled resources to help each other succeed financially. Hello. I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. Sometimes family support makes the difference between someone achieving their dreams and spending their whole life wondering what might have been. The emotional pressure was relentless and came from directions I hadn't anticipated. Extended family members began calling me after hearing from my parents that I was hesitant to help Melody during her time of need. Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, lectured me about the importance of family bonds and suggested that my reluctance to help indicated selfishness that would damage our relationships permanently. "I'm disappointed in you, Casandra," she said during a phone call that felt more like an interrogation. "Your parents raised you better than this. When family needs help, you don't count pennies and make excuses." Uncle Mark, Dad's younger brother, took a more aggressive approach during his call. "What exactly are you saving that money for? That's more important than your sister's future," he demanded. "You're 26 years old, living at home, with no major expenses. It's time to step up and show some family loyalty." Each conversation left me feeling more isolated and misunderstood. My former allies within the family had turned against me based on a one-sided story that painted me as someone who hoarded money while watching family members struggle. The worst part was discovering how Melody had been spending the money she'd already borrowed. I found her credit card statements on the kitchen counter one morning, apparently left there accidentally while she was organizing her business paperwork. "Hello. I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together." Instead, she was spending like someone who already had established income and could afford to purchase whatever caught her attention. The money she'd borrowed was being treated like free spending cash rather than debt that needed to generate returns. When I tried to discuss these concerns with my parents, they defended Melody's spending as necessary investments in her business education and professional development. "She needs to understand industry standards," Mom explained. "You can't expect her to compete with established businesses using amateur equipment and methods." Dad nodded in agreement. "Your sister is being smart about learning from successful people in her field. That's exactly what entrepreneurs should do." Their unwavering support for Melody's financial decisions, combined with their growing criticism of my reluctance to fund those decisions, made me realize that rational discussion about business planning was no longer possible in our house. The extended family pressure campaign intensified as Melody's studio rent deadline approached. Grandparents who rarely called suddenly became regular voices expressing disappointment in my selfishness. Cousins sent text messages asking why I wouldn't help Melody when I clearly had the financial ability to do so. The narrative that emerged from these conversations revealed how my family had characterized the situation to everyone in our social circle. According to their version, I was a financially successful daughter who was refusing to help her struggling younger sister achieve her dreams, despite having more money than I needed for my simple lifestyle. Nobody mentioned that I worked 2 jobs to earn that money, or that I had legitimate plans for my savings, because my family didn't know about those plans. They had created a story where my financial responsibility was evidence of coldness rather than planning, and my reluctance to immediately fund Melody's business was proof of selfishness rather than wisdom. The emotional manipulation reached its peak during a family meeting my parents called 3 weeks before Melody's studio rent was due. We sat around the same kitchen table where this entire conflict had started, but the atmosphere was now charged with accusations and ultimatums. "We need to resolve this situation tonight," Dad announced, his voice carrying an edge I had rarely heard before. "Melody is about to lose her studio space, and she'll have to declare bankruptcy at 24 years old if we don't figure out how to help her." Melody sat across from me with tears already forming in her eyes, looking like a victim rather than someone who had made impulsive financial decisions without consulting anyone. "I don't understand why you're making this so complicated, Cassandra," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm not asking for a gift. This would be an investment in a business that we could build together. You'd get your money back plus profits once the jewelry starts selling." When I asked for more time to consider the decision, Melody's emotional control cracked completely. "You clearly don't love me," she screamed, standing up from the table so forcefully that her chair fell backward. "You've always been jealous of my creativity and ambition. You can't stand the thought of me being successful because then you won't be the only daughter that Mom and Dad are proud of." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I had spent months trying to support Melody's artistic goals while managing my own financial plans, and she genuinely believed that I was motivated by jealousy and competition rather than legitimate concerns about her business approach. In that moment, I realized that our family relationships had become so distorted by money and pressure that my sister truly saw me as an enemy standing between her and her dreams. The loving, supportive, dynamic wedge shared for 26 years had been destroyed by her financial crisis and my family's response to it. The confrontation that destroyed my relationship with my family began with Dad's voice raised louder than I had ever heard it directed at me. We remained seated around the kitchen table, but the atmosphere had shifted from discussion to interrogation. "You are being cold and calculating just like your Uncle Richard," he said, referencing his estranged older brother, who had prioritized financial success over family relationships. "I didn't raise you to put money ahead of the people who love you." The comparison to Uncle Richard stung because I knew Dad still felt hurt by his brother's refusal to help during Dad's business crisis years earlier. Now Dad was casting me in the same role, as someone who chose money over family loyalty when support was needed most. Mom's approach was more emotional but equally devastating. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at me with genuine confusion and disappointment. "I don't understand how I raised a daughter who could watch her sister struggle and choose to do nothing when she has the power to help," she said, her voice breaking. "This isn't the person I thought you were, Cassandra." The weight of their disappointment was crushing, but what happened next crossed every line of acceptable family behavior. Melody, still standing from her earlier outburst, began making threats that shocked everyone in the room. "If I lose this studio space and have to declare bankruptcy, it will ruin my entire life," she said, her voice escalating to a dangerous pitch. "My credit will be destroyed before I'm 25. I'll never be able to buy a house or start a family or build any kind of future. If that happens, I don't know what I'll do to myself." The implied threat of self-harm sent Mom into a panic. She jumped up to comfort Melody while Dad turned his full anger toward me. "Are you going to sit there and let your sister's life be destroyed because you're too selfish to write a check?" he demanded. "What kind of person does that make you?" I tried explaining that I wasn't refusing to help, but that I needed time to understand the full scope of what Melody was asking and develop a plan that would actually set her business up for success rather than just throwing money at poor planning. "There's nothing to understand," Melody shouted over my explanation. "I need $20,000 to cover the studio deposit, first year's rent, and essential equipment. Either you care enough about your sister to help, or you don't." When I suggested we could explore other options like business loans, smaller studio spaces, or a gradual approach to building her business, Melody rejected every alternative as inadequate. "You don't understand what it takes to succeed in competitive markets," she said dismissively. "I can't build a professional jewelry business from our basement with amateur equipment. I need proper facilities and professional tools, or there's no point in even trying." My parents supported her position completely, framing any suggestion of starting smaller or managing expenses more carefully as evidence that I didn't truly believe in Melody's abilities or want her to succeed. The conversation continued for over 3 hours, with every family grievance and resentment coming to the surface. Melody accused me of always being the perfect daughter who made everyone else look inadequate by comparison. She claimed my academic achievements and financial responsibility were ways of showing superiority rather than positive traits that could benefit our family. "You've always acted like you're better than the rest of us," she said, her voice filled with years of accumulated resentment. "Getting good grades, saving money, working multiple jobs, acting so responsible and mature. It's all been about making yourself look good while making everyone else feel like failures." My parents revealed their own years of complicated feelings about my success and their struggles. Dad admitted feeling embarrassed that his daughter was more financially stable at 26 than he had been at that age. Mom expressed frustration that my achievements sometimes made her feel like an inadequate parent who hadn't provided enough opportunities for both daughters to succeed equally. "Maybe if we could have afforded college for both of you, Melody would have more options now," Mom said, as if my scholarships and student loans had somehow taken opportunities away from my sister. The distorted perspective was overwhelming. My family had reframed my positive qualities as character flaws and my financial planning as evidence of selfishness. They genuinely believed that my success obligated me to fund Melody's poor decisions, and my hesitation to do so proved that I cared more about money than family relationships. As the argument reached its peak, something happened that finally opened my eyes to how toxic our family dynamic had become. Melody, frustrated by my continued questions about her business plan and timeline for profitability, grabbed my purse from the kitchen counter and started looking for my checkbook. "If you won't help willingly, I'll take what's mine as family," she said, dumping the contents of my purse onto the table while searching for my financial documents. When I stood up to stop her from going through my personal belongings, she screamed that I had stolen her future by refusing to fund her dreams, and that I would be responsible for every bad thing that happened to her because of her business failure. But the moment that changed everything was when Dad, apparently believing that physical intimidation might succeed where emotional manipulation had failed, grabbed my shoulders and shook me while demanding that I stop being selfish and write the check immediately. In that instant, with my father's hands gripping my shoulders and my sister rifling through my personal belongings while my mother watched without intervening, I realized that my family relationships had become abusive. I was no longer safe in my own home, and the people who claimed to love me were treating me like an enemy whose only value was my ability to solve their financial problems. The clarity that came with that realization was both terrifying and liberating. I understood that no amount of explanation about my graduate school plans would matter, because my family had already decided that Melody's immediate wants were more important than my future goals. They had convinced themselves that I owed them my savings simply because I had been responsible enough to accumulate money while living at home. Instead of continuing to argue or defend my position, I made a decision that would change my life permanently. I calmly walked upstairs to my bedroom, packed a suitcase with essential belongings, and prepared to leave the house where I had lived for 26 years. My family was still arguing downstairs, probably assuming I was having an emotional breakdown and would return shortly with my checkbook and an apology for being selfish. They had no idea that they had just lost their daughter and sister forever. I didn't slam doors or make dramatic announcements when I left my childhood home that night. While my family continued their heated discussion downstairs about how to convince me to fund Melody's business venture, I quietly gathered my most important possessions and walked out the front door without looking back. My decision to leave without explanation was strategic rather than emotional. I had realized during the confrontation that my family was so invested in their narrative about my selfishness that no amount of rational discussion would change their perspective. Telling them about my graduate school plans would only give them new ammunition for arguments about why my educational goals were less important than Melody's immediate crisis. I drove directly to a hotel near the airport and spent the night researching apartments in Illinois, close to Northwestern University's campus. Using my smartphone, I found a furnished one-bedroom apartment that I could rent month to month while I figured out my longer-term living situation. I put down a deposit using my debit card and arranged to sign the lease within 48 hours. The next morning, while my family was probably expecting me to return home with an apology and my checkbook, I was loading my car with everything that mattered to me and driving 3 states away to start a new life. I had left a note on my bedroom dresser explaining that I needed space to think and would contact them when I was ready, but I had no intention of returning to Indiana until my family demonstrated genuine respect for my autonomy and financial decisions. My first priority was protecting my savings from any potential family interference. I drove to my bank branch and discovered that my parents still had access to my account from when I was a minor, something I had never bothered to change because I trusted them completely. I immediately closed that account and opened new ones at a different bank, transferring my entire $20,000 balance to accounts that only I could access. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. When I contacted the admissions office to explain my change in circumstances, they informed me that a student had recently dropped out of the current semester, creating an opening that I could fill with just 2 weeks' notice. The speed with which I could transition from living with my family to pursuing my graduate degree independently proved that my financial planning had been exactly right. I had saved enough money to cover not just the educational expenses, but also the costs of relocating suddenly and establishing a completely new life in a different state. Meanwhile, my family's response to my disappearance revealed how little they understood about my character and motivations. The text messages and voicemails they left assumed I was having a temporary tantrum that would end when I came to my senses and realized the importance of family loyalty. "Stop being dramatic and come home so we can work this out like adults," Dad's first voicemail said. "Melody's studio rent is due in 2 weeks, and we need to resolve this situation." Mom's messages were more emotional, but equally focused on bringing me home to fund Melody's business rather than addressing the abusive behavior that had driven me away. "We love you and miss you, but you can't run away from family responsibilities," she said in a tearful voicemail. "Melody needs her big sister right now, and we need to figure out how to help her together. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together." Mom recruited extended family members to call me and express concern about my welfare. Melody posted passive-aggressive messages on social media about ungrateful family members who abandon people during their darkest hours. 2 months after my departure, my family finally began to realize that I had not simply moved out temporarily to make a point about their behavior. When they drove to my old apartment building and discovered I had truly disappeared without providing any forwarding address, panic began to replace anger in their communications. They contacted my former employers, who confirmed that I had given proper notice and left with excellent references, but who refused to provide any information about my current location. The bank informed them that I had legally closed my accounts and transferred my funds, but could not discuss my financial activities with anyone except me. The reality that I had completely severed ties with my family began to sink in just as Mom was cleaning out my bedroom and discovered information that would change everything they thought they understood about my motivations and character. Behind my dresser, she found my Northwestern University acceptance letter with detailed information about the graduate program I planned to attend. In my desk drawer, she discovered months of careful budget planning spreadsheets showing exactly how I intended to use my savings for educational expenses and living costs while earning my degree. Most shocking of all, she found receipts and bank statements proving that I had been secretly paying for Dad's diabetes medications for 8 months, spending over $4,000 of my own money to help with family medical expenses that I had never mentioned to anyone. She also discovered evidence that I had been working additional tutoring hours specifically to cover household groceries and utilities, contributing far more to family finances than they had realized, while still maintaining my savings goals for graduate school. The documentation revealed that they had been accusing the most financially generous and supportive family member of selfishness, while she was actually subsidizing their household expenses and pursuing legitimate educational goals that would improve her career prospects. Mom sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by evidence of my sacrifices and planning, finally understanding that they had destroyed their relationship with the daughter who had been helping them most while asking for nothing in return. They had lost me not because I was selfish, but because they had become so focused on melodious wants that they couldn't recognize genuine love and support when it was quietly provided without expectation of recognition or repayment. 4 months after my departure from Indiana, my family's attempts to contact me had evolved from angry demands to desperate pleas for forgiveness. The evidence Mom discovered in my bedroom had shattered every assumption they had made about my character and motivations, forcing them to confront the reality of what they had lost. Janet spent days going through my financial records and personal documents, piecing together a picture of my life that contradicted everything they had believed about my priorities. The Northwestern acceptance letter was dated 8 months before our family conflict began, proving that I had legitimate, long-term educational goals for my savings rather than simply hoarding money selfishly. The budget spreadsheets were even more revealing, showing detailed calculations of graduate school expenses, estimated living costs, and timelines for achieving financial milestones. Every dollar in my savings account had been allocated to specific educational purposes, from tuition and books to apartment deposits and emergency funds for unexpected expenses during my studies. Most devastating was the discovery of my secret financial support for our family. Dad's diabetes medication receipts showed I had been covering his prescriptions whenever his insurance fell short, spending money that should have gone toward my educational goals to ensure he stayed healthy. Additional receipts revealed I had been buying groceries and paying utilities without mentioning these contributions to anyone. Robert was forced to confront the painful truth that I had been supporting him medically and financially while he was pressuring me to give up my educational future for Melody's poorly planned business venture. The daughter he had accused of being cold and selfish had actually been sacrificing her own comfort and timeline to ensure his health and our family's stability. Meanwhile, Melody's business collapse unfolded exactly as I had predicted when I asked questions about her planning and sustainability. Without access to my savings as startup capital, she couldn't cover the studio rent beyond the first month. Her credit cards were maxed out, and she had no income stream to support the expenses she had committed to without consulting anyone. The studio space was repossessed within 6 weeks, and Melody lost her security deposit when she couldn't fulfill the lease agreement. The expensive equipment she had purchased sat unused in our parents' garage, representing thousands of dollars of debt with no corresponding business income to show for the investment. However, being forced to face the consequences of her financial decisions without family enablement turned out to be exactly what Melody needed for personal growth. With no choice but to find immediate employment to pay her bills, she took an entry-level position at a local jewelry store where she learned proper business operations from the ground up. Working retail for the first time taught her about customer service, inventory management, pricing strategies, and the daily realities of running a sustainable business. Her manager, impressed by Melody's natural artistic abilities, began teaching her advanced jewelry repair techniques and introducing her to reliable suppliers who worked with small businesses. For the first time in her life, Melody was earning money through her jewelry skills rather than spending money on jewelry dreams. The steady paycheck and structured work environment gave her perspective on the difference between sustainable business planning and impulsive spending funded by other people's money. My parents' attempts to contact me became increasingly frantic as they realized the full scope of their mistake. They called my old phone number daily, leaving voicemails that progressed from anger to bargaining to genuine remorse. They sent letters to my previous address, hoping somehow the messages would reach me in my new location. Dad's voicemails were particularly heartbreaking as he struggled to accept his role in driving away the daughter who had been caring for his health without recognition or appreciation. "I was wrong about everything," he said in one message, his voice thick with emotion. "I found the receipts for my medications. I found your college acceptance letter. I understand now why you needed that money, and am ashamed of how we treated you. Please call me back so I can apologize properly." Mom's letters were filled with detailed accounts of the evidence she had discovered and her growing understanding of my perspective during our family conflict. "I know now that you were never selfish," she wrote in careful handwriting. "You were protecting your future while secretly taking care of our present. We accused you of not caring about family while you were caring for us more than we realized. I don't know how to fix this, but I hope you'll give us the chance to try." Extended family members who had criticized me during the conflict began calling my parents to retract their previous judgments and express regret for participating in the campaign of pressure and manipulation. Aunt Patricia was particularly apologetic when she learned about my graduate school plans and secret financial contributions to our household. "We all owe Casandra an apology," she told Mom during a phone conversation that Mom later referenced in one of her letters to me. "She was the most responsible and generous person in this whole situation, and we treated her like she was the problem." 6 months after my departure, my family received a call that would provide them with the first concrete information about my new life since I had left Indiana. Northwestern University's financial aid office contacted our house, asking if family members wanted to attend my graduate degree ceremony as guests of the honor student recipient. The university representative explained that I had been selected for academic honors during my first semester and was completing my master's degree program in record time while working as a teaching assistant and conducting research that had already been accepted for publication in educational psychology journals. Casandra mentioned that she has family in Indiana, the representative said, but she made it clear that she achieved this success independently and would understand if family members were not able to attend the ceremony. The call confirmed that not only had I successfully pursued my educational goals without their support, but I had excelled beyond anything they could have imagined. While they had been pressuring me to sacrifice my future for Melody's failed business venture, I had been building the foundation for a career that would benefit children with learning disabilities for decades to come. The contrast between my success and Melody's failure was stark evidence that my refusal to fund her business had been wise financial planning rather than selfish behavior. I had protected not just my own future, but potentially prevented our family from losing $20,000 on a venture that was doomed to fail due to poor planning and unrealistic expectations. My parents finally understood that they had lost their most successful and caring daughter through their own greed, manipulation, and failure to recognize her legitimate goals and generous character. They had chosen to support Melody's immediate wants over my long-term plans, and the consequences of that choice had cost them their relationship with me while failing to help Melody achieve sustainable success. The invitation to my graduation ceremony represented everything they had missed while focusing on the wrong daughter's crisis. They had driven away the family member who was actually achieving something meaningful and lasting, while enabling behavior that had predictably led to failure and debt. The 8 missed calls glowing on my phone screen this Tuesday morning represented 18 months of family reckoning that had finally led my parents to fully understand the magnitude of their mistake. Each voicemail contained a different family member's attempt to apologize, explain their realization, and beg for the opportunity to rebuild the relationship they had destroyed through their own behavior. Dad's first message was barely coherent through his tears. Casandra, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I understand everything now. I found all the medication receipts. I know you were taking care of me while I was treating you terribly. I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover how ashamed I am. Mom's voicemail was longer and more detailed. We got the call from Northwestern about your graduation ceremony. We learned that you're receiving academic honors and that you've already been accepted to a doctoral program with full funding. We missed everything important because we were focused on the wrong crisis. I'm so proud of you and so sorry for how we treated you when you were being responsible and wise. Melody's message showed the most personal growth. I need to tell you that you were right about everything. My business failed exactly like you predicted because I wasn't planning properly. But having to get a real job and pay my own bills taught me lessons I needed to learn. I work at a jewelry store now, and am actually good at it because I had to develop real skills instead of just buying expensive equipment. I understand now that you weren't trying to hurt me. You were trying to protect me from making bigger mistakes. The remaining messages came from extended family members who had pressured me during the original conflict. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Mark, and even my grandparents called to retract their previous criticisms and apologize for participating in the emotional manipulation campaign that had driven me away from my family. We were wrong to interfere, Aunt Patricia's message admitted. We didn't understand the full situation, and we said things to you that we deeply regret. You were being responsible and generous, and we treated you like you were selfish. We hope you can forgive us. As I listened to these messages in my apartment near Northwestern's campus, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. The vindication was satisfying after 18 months of knowing I had been right to protect my savings and pursue my education. But I also felt sadness for the time we had lost, and the pain my family had experienced while learning lessons I had tried to teach them through my actions. My new life had exceeded even my own expectations for success and fulfillment. I was completing my master's degree in educational psychology with a 4.0 grade point average while working as a teaching assistant and conducting research that had already been published in academic journals. I had been accepted to Northwestern's doctoral program with full funding, meaning I could continue my education without any financial stress. More importantly, I had met David, a fellow graduate student in the counseling psychology program who shared my passion for helping children with learning disabilities. Our relationship was built on mutual respect, shared goals, and healthy communication about our individual and combined futures. He admired my independence and financial wisdom rather than trying to pressure me into funding his poor decisions. David had supported my decision to maintain limited contact with my family while they worked through their own growth and understanding. He understood that reconciliation needed to happen on my terms, with clear evidence that my family had genuinely changed their perspective and behavior, rather than simply apologizing because they missed me. After 6 months of consistent letters and voicemails showing genuine accountability and personal growth, I had agreed to a phone conversation with my parents. We talked for 2 hours about what had happened, why it had happened, and what needed to change for us to rebuild our relationship. "We understand now that we were asking you to sacrifice your future for Melody's present crisis," Dad said during that first conversation. "We should have been proud of your planning and success instead of treating them as obstacles to helping your sister." Mom added, "We learned that supporting family doesn't mean enabling poor decisions or demanding that one person solve everyone else's problems. We should have helped Melody develop better planning skills, instead of pressuring you to fund her mistakes." The gradual process of rebuilding our relationship required clear boundaries and evidence of lasting change. I explained that I was willing to have a relationship with my family, but it would be based on mutual respect and recognition of my autonomy rather than guilt and obligation. Melody's transformation was the most encouraging part of our family's growth. Working at the jewelry store had taught her practical skills and realistic perspectives about business operations. She had paid off her credit card debt and was saving money responsibly while developing her artistic abilities through structured learning rather than expensive equipment purchases. "I want to start my own jewelry business again someday," she told me during one of our phone conversations. "But this time, I'll do it right. I'll save money first, start small, build a customer base gradually, and make sure I can cover my expenses before I expand. You tried to teach me that, but I wasn't ready to listen." 6 months after our first phone conversation, my family attended my graduation ceremony from Northwestern's master's program. Seeing them in the audience as I received academic honors for my research and teaching was emotional for all of us, representing both the success I had achieved independently and the relationships we had managed to rebuild through honest communication and mutual respect. David was also there, having proposed to me the week before graduation with a ring he had saved for, and purchased himself without expecting anyone else to fund his major life decisions. Our engagement represented the healthy relationship dynamics I had learned were possible when both people took responsibility for their own choices and supported each other's individual goals. My family's attendance at my doctoral program acceptance ceremony 1 year later marked the complete transformation of our relationships. We had maintained consistent contact based on genuine interest in each other's lives, rather than financial obligation or crisis management. Melody had successfully started a small jewelry business from home, operating as a profitable side venture while maintaining her steady job at the jewelry store. She asked for my advice on marketing and business planning, demonstrating genuine respect for my expertise and experience rather than entitlement to my financial support. "I'm proud of both my daughters," Dad said during the dinner celebration after my acceptance ceremony. "One daughter taught us about financial responsibility and pursuing long-term goals, and the other daughter learned those lessons and is building her success on solid foundation." Mom agreed, adding, "We're stronger as a family because Casandra had the courage to set boundaries and force us to grow." Sometimes loving someone means refusing to enable their poor decisions, even when it's difficult and uncomfortable. The life lesson that emerged from our family's crisis and healing was that genuine support means encouraging responsibility and growth, not providing money to avoid consequences of poor planning. My refusal to fund Melody's business wasn't selfish. It was the catalyst that forced everyone in our family to develop better financial and emotional maturity. Walking away from toxic family dynamics, even temporarily, had allowed everyone to grow and learn lessons that would benefit us for the rest of our lives. My savings account had protected not just my educational future, but our entire family's long-term financial health by preventing us from losing $20,000 on a business venture that was destined to fail. As I begin my doctoral studies with full funding and a clear career path toward opening learning centers for children with learning disabilities, I understand that my decision to protect my savings was actually an act of love for my entire family. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's poor financial decisions, even when they call you selfish for having boundaries and long-term vision. My relationship with David continues to grow stronger because we both understand the importance of individual responsibility and mutual support. My relationships with my family have been rebuilt on foundations of respect and understanding, rather than guilt and obligation. Most importantly, I achieved my educational and career goals because I had the courage to prioritize my legitimate plans over other people's immediate wants. The woman who walked away from her family's emotional manipulation is now Dr. Casandra, preparing to spend her career helping children who struggle in traditional learning environments. The money my family demanded I sacrifice for a failed business venture is instead funding research that will improve educational outcomes for thousands of children with learning disabilities. Justice wasn't just served when my family apologized and acknowledged their mistakes. Justice was served when I refused to sacrifice my future for their poor planning, protected my financial goals despite intense pressure and criticism, and achieved success that will benefit countless children who need advocates in their educational journeys. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to refuse to enable their dysfunction, even when they call you selfish for having the wisdom to see beyond the immediate crisis to the long-term consequences of financial irresponsibility. Have you ever been in a situation where your family expected you to sacrifice your own goals to solve someone else's crisis? How did you handle the pressure between family loyalty and protecting your own future? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone else find the courage to set healthy boundaries and pursue their own dreams, even when family members try to make them feel guilty for being responsible and forward-thinking. Please like this story if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life experiences about family dynamics and personal growth, and share this with anyone who might be struggling with similar pressure to sacrifice their future for someone else's immediate problems. Remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no to enabling poor decisions, even when it means being temporarily misunderstood by people you care about. Until next time, trust your instincts, protect your dreams, and remember that your financial responsibility is a strength, not a character flaw.